Trail Talk here on LTTV. I'm Chris Forde. I'm the Director of Marketing for Illinois Eastern Community Colleges and Lincoln Trail College. And joining me is Dr. Zahi Atallah, the President at Lincoln Trail College. Zahi, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing excellent. And we're going to be talking with some really exciting folks.
Yeah, so, we have kind of taken a break with Trail Talk here for a little bit as the school year ended, and now we're kicking back up, and we're starting a series where we are talking to some nationally recognized experts in community colleges. And today we're starting with Dr. Debra Bragg.
Yes, Dr. Bragg is not quite the household name that she should be, but she was for a number of years at the University of Illinois, where she started a center focused on community college education, and now she's at the University of Washington. She's worked nationally on a number of community college initiatives, including pathways to four-year degrees at community colleges. We're excited to talk to her. I think she's a reference.
Yeah, let's check it out. Joining us now on Trail Talk is Dr. Debra Bragg. Debra, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Chris?
I'm good, thank you. So for the people that don't know you, don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about who you are and the work that you've done in your career, and where some people may know you is your work at the University of Illinois.
Yes. Well, I won't belabor my background too much, but say I did grow up in Illinois on a farm a little bit north of where you're located, but I grew up a farm kid and was lucky enough to go to the University of Illinois as an undergraduate student. Went on to be a teacher and get my graduate degrees at Ohio State University, and came back to the University of Illinois to be a professor eventually. And I was at Illinois for 25 years. I started the Office of Community College Research and Leadership at U of I and spent my entire career studying higher education, community college education, and a lot of my time has also been studying career and technical education and workforce development. So there's a kind of key areas. In 2015, I retired from Illinois and went west to Seattle, Washington, and then spent about 5 years at the University of Washington in Seattle, where I started a second community college research group called Community College Research Initiatives. And that group still continues, as does the research group OCCRL at U of I. Both those centers continue, and I have now started a consulting firm that is Bragg and Associates, my husband and I, who is also a professor at Illinois. So we do consulting in our respective areas, and my work with community colleges continues across the country in various capacities. But one of the exciting projects I have right now is with the state of Illinois and with the Illinois Community College Trustees Association and their leadership, and they're exploring the possibility of community colleges conferring baccalaureate degrees in Illinois. And that's an area that I've done research for about the past 12, 13 years. So that's a little bit about me, hopefully enough to get us started.
So, to start off with, obviously a great history of community college and community college research. Talk about why community colleges are so important, especially in rural areas like we are here in Robinson.
Yeah, absolutely. Community colleges, as they've evolved, are they're quite unique. They really are an American innovation. They're unique to the United States in many respects because of the commitment of local citizens to operate a college. And the way our community colleges are funded through a partnership between the state, the local districts, and the students themselves, that kind of tripartite relationship is quite unique. And Illinois is one of the oldest, has some of the richest history, and is one of the most fully developed community college states in the country, has one of the larger systems of community colleges. So while other countries have colleges that do largely technical education at the post-secondary level, community colleges are unique in that they have a comprehensive mission in our country. And so students can study nursing and they can study history and psychology and English, so we bring all of that together and make it accessible to people in, where they live. And that whole idea really is an American higher education innovation, that I think should all be really proud of, and we need to protect and continue to help grow and nurture, because it is so important. And it's probably nowhere is it more important than in rural areas like Robinson. Because without, you don't have to think too hard, without your colleges, where would people go? Especially when you look at many of our learners who are working, have families, it's not an option to pick up and, go hundreds of miles away when that works if you're 17 or 18, but it doesn't work so well if you're 27 or 37. So we know how critical these colleges are really to the citizens where you're located. And that is uniquely important to particularly those rural areas.
So, Deborah, jumping off from there, what do you think the future of community colleges looks like?
In so many ways, community colleges are kind of that great frontier of higher education. They sort of push out beyond some of the tradition that higher education is steeped in. So the fact that we are talking about working learners as the majority of learners now in higher education, not just in community colleges, but the majority of students in higher education. Well, community colleges have been serving those learners for decades and have learned how to do that well. So I think that we're still on the front edge of understanding how colleges can be more flexible and more really address the needs of working learners and our historically underserved learners, populations of students who still their families haven't gone to college, and we have many of those students across our state, and particularly in our rural areas. So college has to look different, and I think increasingly community colleges are really making the effort and making the changes so that college it stays affordable, that it's accessible, that I like to say it's affordable, accessible, and applicable. It matters that you can use that knowledge to help yourself and your family in an immediate way. And, I know community colleges are challenged right now almost everywhere with enrollment because of the pandemic, because of the economy. I think we will come out of that, but somewhat of an unprecedented time that we've seen in the history of community colleges has been this recent loss of students. But I think that, that we will come back. We will still see students come back. But I do think we have to continue to change as community colleges to really meet the needs of students who college is challenging. And we have to figure out why and how we can do something about that. But I have more confidence that community colleges will figure that out than traditional higher ed, to be honest.
So sort of along those lines and kind of looking at this specifically through the lens of rural America and underserved populations, what are your thoughts on the future of workforce preparation and liberal arts education and the role of community colleges?
Yeah, you're kind of singing my song here. So throughout most of my career, I've written and talked about the importance of better integrating higher education so that we recognize that almost all higher education is workforce development. And so these artificial boundaries that we sometimes draw between what we consider workforce and what we consider liberal arts, I think that's a blurrier line than we often, than our policies tend to represent it, including how we fund college. I think we'd all be better off if we thought about a college education as an education that strategically integrates liberal arts and workforce development, because I think all of that is really important. But we sort of seem to be moving in the opposite direction in a way. We do see the growth of workforce training programs that are offered by community colleges. A lot of those are linked up to different forms of credentials and certifications that are really important to helping people get jobs, but they also, I think, need to be seen as part of a career pathway that extends beyond those initial credentials. It's really important that we create ways for students who are working and maybe have those early credentials, help them find ways to come back and continue their education. And it's at that level where we really need to integrate better all of the competencies that we need to be good workers, good family members, good friends, good citizens. All those things are really important. And I hope that when we're designing, college programs of study, post-secondary programs of study, that we're thinking about people as sort of that in that holistic way. It's not just about finding a job. That's a part of a person's life, but there's much more to living. And I think college should be a part of that. And I think it can be a part of that as long as we keep our minds open to preparing the whole person. To me, that's really, really important. I hope we don't lose track of that.
A little earlier, you talked about colleges adapting and changing to the times, and the opportunity where community colleges have the ability to make some of those changes. What do you think, like state and federal governments or private foundations, businesses could do to help us adapt to some of these new approaches?
Yeah, well, certainly the state could better fund community colleges. I think, I recently was talking to a reporter who asked me this same question. I said, I think states should better fund their community colleges. And they said, oh, you don't want to say that or something like that. It was such an interesting response. He said, well, that's not going to happen. And I thought, well, if we don't keep fighting the fight and making clear why adequate funding is important for community colleges, and not only community colleges, the communities where these colleges are located are also, particularly in rural areas, are also communities that do need more equitable funding for education, period. But that includes community colleges. So I do think it's important to always put it out there. We need to better fund our community colleges. I think the state does play an important role in help prioritizing and shaping policies that are important to the state. I think policies around serving underserved students, underrepresented students, first generation college, low income students of color, those populations who we've not served well in higher education, in any of higher education, frankly. This, in many respects, community colleges have been on the front edge of trying to better serve our students who are marginalized, but we could do better in the community college, and I think that has to be a priority for the state, and I know that it is a priority, but I think it could be even more fully addressed. The federal role is fairly modest in the community college. They are the driver of Pell Grants and our funding for low-income students. There are some grant programs through education, labor, the National Science Foundation, but those are really quite modest when you look at the budget of a community college. Usually less than 10% of the funding would come from outside of that local area, student tuition dollars, which could be Pell, and the state. So the feds have a relatively minor role, although they set priorities. A good example around that is the emphasis on college completion. And that became a federal goal to improve college completion about a decade or so ago, a little more than that. And that really pushed the whole movement around student success across the country. So they are a voice for policy change, but less so a funder of those policy changes. I'd say, I do a lot of work with private foundations. My concern about, and yes, I think some of the dollars that foundations put into helping fund other innovations, new ideas, competency-based education, for example, baccalaureate degrees, these various credentialing pathways have been heavily funded through foundations. The issue I have there is that they can choose where they put their money, and often they do not put adequate dollars into our rural community colleges. They'll fund a college like the College of DuPage, or they'll fund, other big schools, but the majority of community colleges in this country are rural and smaller town colleges. And they sort of get left out when those innovation dollars flow. And it makes it really hard, particularly given the resource constraints that rural colleges face. It's very hard to be on kind of that leading edge of innovation when you're just trying to figure out, how to get paychecks out, in the next month or term. But I'm not saying that rural colleges don't innovate, though. They do, because people are innovative and creative and care about their students and engage in this work in important ways. So it doesn't have to come, from the feds or a foundation or even the state when people are really committed to serving their students. And I have to tell you, I've been in community colleges and I haven't been to Alaska, but I've been to virtually every state in the country, and I visited community colleges in most, and I can tell you people across the country are really passionate about this work, and they care about their students and their communities, and that makes it, just really exciting to work with this sector of higher education.
Is there anything else you want to say today on Trail Talk with us?
Well, I guess I'd just say I hope that our state and some of our colleges will be open to the idea of exploring baccalaureate degrees for students, particularly some of our rural colleges where students, do have quite a ways to drive to get to a face-to-face baccalaureate program. And your region of the state is one where that's a big commitment for folks to commit to the equivalent of 2 years of, upper division, higher education, and making that more accessible to students, and particularly in areas where we know that the region and the communities could really use people in to help grow the workforce and improve the economy. Those are the kind of programs that we're talking about here, not replicating what the four-year schools do. These are programs that would help address economic and workforce supply and demand issues. So that's what we're exploring, and I'm really hopeful that Illinois Eastern and others across the state and rural areas will kind of go along on our journey, working with the Illinois Community College Trustees Association to see what might be possible. We won't. We're the researchers. We're consultants, and our role is to look at the data and provide some ideas. And we're not the decision makers. So we'll leave that to others in this state to ultimately determine. But we hope that will be open to following what 25 other states have already done. Illinois, I think, should be in that group.
All right.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. This has been great. I appreciate it.
Dr. Debra Bragg has been joining us on Trail Talk this week, and stick around. We'll have more coming up later. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Wow, what a wonderful conversation. I'm sure you learned a lot from it.
Yeah, there was a lot to take away, and I think one of the interesting perspectives that she talked about there was the importance of community colleges, especially in rural locations like ours.
Yes.
She talked a little bit about how, a lot of times when the money flows, it flows to the big community colleges.
Yeah, the urban centers.
Yeah, but we have the opportunity to make a really big impact on people right here. And in some cases, we may be the only opportunity that they have for higher education.
Yeah, so are you saying that she's validating what you've been working on and trying to, talk about to others? Do you think that now we can get the message perhaps more crisply from somebody who's not working at the community college?
Yeah, I think that's really important because it's easy for us to say that.
Right.
Because we know that, we believe it, but it is very validating to hear other people and people with her level of expertise say that and share that and really make sure that people know that.
Yeah, and she probably has the research data to back everything she said up.
Absolutely. So this was kind of the first in a series that we're going to be doing over the next few weeks. So be sure and like this video, subscribe to our channel here on YouTube, ring that bell for notifications when we post more content like this or other content on our YouTube channel, and follow us on our other social media platforms as well. So for Dr. Atallah, I'm Chris Forde. We'll see you next time on Trail Talk on LTTV.